Welcome to Write Books That Sell Now, the podcast helping you write, publish, and market your book faster, better, and smarter. Here are your hosts, working hard and having fun doing it, Candace L. Davis, Anita Henderson, and Carol Dunlop.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Write Books That Sell Now podcast. We are happy to be here. I'm Anita Henderson, one third of the dynamic trio that is your Write Books That Sell Now hosts. Anita Henderson, of course, I'm joined by my partners in success, Carol Dunlop and Candace Davis. Hey, ladies.
Hey, guys.
Good to see you here. You know, we are the podcast that helps you be a successful self-published author. We give you all the tools, the resources, the experts, the information. We want you to be awesome. If you're going to do this independent self-published author thing, we want you to do it right. And so today, on this episode of Write Books That Sell Now, we're going to be talking about some mistakes. And we've only picked out 9, but trust me, we know of many more than 9 common mistakes that self-published authors make when publishing their books. We're going to tick through those in detail. We hope if you're watching or listening, go ahead and get your little notepad ready because we're going to give you some things you'll want to jot down so you can avoid these mistakes. But before we get to that, Miss Candace, what is on your mind?
Well, what is on my mind is Walker Stalker Con. I have a friend who I met at a meetup through an online class that I took. And we became really Facebook friends because we lived kind of far from each other. And she was volunteering at Walker Stalker Con, and she had an extra ticket, and she kindly gifted it to me. So for those of you who don't do cons, it's kind of like Comic-Con or Dragon Con or whatever for Walking Dead fans, right? And she knows that that's my show. I'm a Walking Dead fan, even though I watch about 10% of it with my eyes closed. Like I watch a lot of it with my eyes closed. But so you go and all the stars of the show are there and they're signing autographs and taking selfies, and a bunch of them have signs that say no hugs because we don't want to get sick, and if we hug 1,000 people we will get sick. And there were 19,000 people there each day, so that's a lot of germs in one space.
Yeah.
But the really cool thing was that besides the stars, which was cool to see them, there were all these artists selling related wares. So a lot of them were selling their renditions of the characters from the show in some way. Mixed among those artists were authors selling their books. So the books were not about the show. They were not about characters related to the show. They weren't fan fiction books or anything of that type. But they were books written in a genre that might appeal to people who like this show. And some of the authors were kind of sitting back in their little booths and not making eye contact with anyone and thus selling no books. And some of the other authors were up and standing outside of their booths or at the edge of their booth and engaging with people as they walked by and telling them about their books, or having little contests where you could enter to win a free copy of the book and get on their mailing list, and doing all kinds of things to engage. And people were walking away with bags of books from their table. So the whole point of that is you don't have to only sell your book in bookstores or on Amazon. If you're creative and think outside of the box, there are related, maybe you would not sell your book at Walker Stalker Con. It might not be the place for your book, but there are related conferences and conventions and seminars and workshops all over the place every day, especially every weekend, where authors can sell their books because they are related to the subject area or would be appealing to the audience at that convention. But you got to get up off your butt. You can't sit on your chair.
Absolutely. Oh, Candace, you just hit me. We're going to have to do another episode on 9 mistakes to avoid at a book selling thing or book fair or something like that. Because, we talk about this all the time. And for those of you who are not part of our online community, you really need to subscribe to our list, because we talk about this stuff in our exclusive newsletter that we send out to our subscribers. And I did a whole a message several months ago about a similar experience at a book signing. But it's really sad when people just think that because you have a table, people are going to want to buy your book. They're going to want to talk to you. They're not. You're one in however many other booksellers there. And unless you create some sense of appeal, some reason for people to stop at your table, to talk to you, to flip through your book, to ask you questions, They're not going to. They're going to talk to the person who's over there, the bookseller, the author who's dressed like one of the Walking Dead people, right? The author who is standing, smiling, greeting people. And that really requires authors to get outside their quiet comfort zone of I'm so shy and I just want to go and write another book somewhere in the corner in the back. You are on now. You're a marketer when you show up at a book selling event, and you have to be the author, marketer all at the same time.
Absolutely. And it was so much fun being there. I snuck in early with the VIPs and got in there before it was packed. But it was really cool to watch how certain vendors did a great job of just even setting up their booth in a way that was appealing to people and sucked them over to their table. And then you could kind of see the people who didn't have quite as much experience or knowledge about how to do that. And as the crowds came in, you could see the results of where people were going, and they were packed 5, 6, 7 people deep. And then there were other booths where there was basically nobody there. So it makes a big difference.
It does. I mean, the same is true at any other book festival. I've seen it 1,000 times. And I feel sorry for people because we all know that it's not free for you to set up a table for the most part at those events. They charge
money. Yes.
And the very least you want to do is earn, here I am with the ROI, right? The very least you want to do is earn back the amount of the space that you paid. If you paid $100 or $250 or whatever, you want to at least make back your money in book sales. If not, exceed that expense. Not to mention the gas or whatever it took for you to get there. Plus, you got to buy all the expenses, right, involved in participating in a book festival, book fair, any other type of event or appearance. Make it profitable for you and execute some strategies that will draw people to your booth. Get outside your comfort zone, even if you feel like you have to get into character, like internally into character. Maybe not dress up like someone, although that might help. Do what you need to do to get people over to your table interested in buying your book. And then we could get all into making it easy for them to purchase on site and all that kind of stuff. But that's for another show, right, Candace?
Absolutely.
But I wanted to jump in there really quick and say that I was searching the internet and I found this lady who I've got to get her on the show called buildbookbuzz.com, Sandra Beckwith. And she was talking about, she had her latest article, someone who said, so you don't want to do social media to sell your book. You don't want to go to trade shows to sell your book. You don't want to go to fairs to sell your book. And you don't want to do interviews to sell your book. So the first thing she said was, do you really want to sell your book? You just need to get over it and figure out what it is you want to do so you can sell a book, because you're going to have to do something. You can't just sit in a hole or sit on the side of the road or sit behind your desk and expect your book to just magically jump into people's pockets. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people expect for their friends and family to be their primary book purchasers. Yeah, I'm here to tell you that's probably not going to happen. From my experience, that's not how you're going to sell books. And we can talk about that on another show. Trust me, that is a whole separate show.
For sure.
Down. So what we're going to get into for this episode of the Write Books That Sell Now podcast is really some mistakes that authors make in publishing their books. And of course, here with the Write Books That Sell Now team, we always talk about the totality of book publishing, and that includes the writing, meaning the content has to be super awesome, the publishing process, and then of course the marketing aspects of it. And so we're going to address this issue of publishing mistakes from those perspectives. And so I'm going to turn it over to Candace and share, so she can share just 3. I know Candace has probably got 300 mistakes she's seen. But Candace, give us and our viewers and listeners 3 mistakes that you see authors make way too often in the publishing process.
Okay. This was hard to narrow down to the top 3, but these were the top 3 that came to mind for today, so that's what we're going with. Because there are a lot of them, and I'm not saying that to be mean, because I make some of the same mistakes myself, but I just know to go back and check and catch them. So one of the most common mistakes I see, especially when I work as a copy editor, is that people don't use spell check. And
Ouch.
they don't use it. And I know spell check has a bad reputation because sometimes it will identify things as misspelled or as grammatically incorrect when they really aren't. They're really correct, and spell check doesn't know any better, and that's okay. You can tell spell check, I know more than you, ignore or ignore all or whatever in those cases. But it does still have a purpose. It still is useful. It will find things like a lack of space between sentences or words that got crammed together, or just words that are completely misspelled, or some of the more basic grammar uses. And the problem is that I think a lot of authors expect that their editor will find and fix those things, right? Mm-hmm. And a good editor will find and fix those things, but not even the best editor is perfect. So the cleaner your manuscript is before you send it off to the editor, the better job she or he can do for you. So if you haven't done something as simple as run spell check, and they're having to look at every other sentence and see a misspelled word or the same word misspelled over and over, not only are you making their job harder, which, while it's not your responsibility to make their job easier, it's to your benefit as an author to make the editor's job easier, because now they can start to really pay attention to some of the finer details, because they're not caught up in all that basic stuff. Trust me when I tell you, you want to send you're not an editor and you don't need to be, but you do want to send your editor the cleanest manuscript you can send. And the same with your beta readers. Before you send to your beta readers, you don't want to send them something that you haven't even spell checked, for goodness sake. So now they're having to struggle through, and you're not making spelling errors because you're stupid. You're making spelling errors because you're human, and we all mistype, or we have certain words that I have certain words that I misspell every single time, so much so that I just wait for the red squiggly lines to come up under it and then click on the right option for how it really should be spelled. And it's like the same 3 words that I misspell all the time. They're common words and not even anything complicated. So if you can clear up all of that stuff, your beta readers can focus on your content as opposed to being distracted by some really basic errors. Your editor can do a much better job for you as opposed to being caught up in really basic errors. And it's just a click of a button, spell check, review. Just click review and go through the process. And if you're not sure, then you can always click ignore and let the editor deal with it at that point. If you're not sure if it's really an error or if spell check's acting crazy again, just ignore it and let the editor deal with it.
Good point. I will say that you mentioned that it's not necessarily the author's job to make their editor's job easier. And I'm not sure I disagree with you. I'm surprised you even said that. I think it is, especially for independent authors, it is part of your job to make your editors and your beta readers, part of the process easier, quite frankly, and for you and your designer as well. So you need to do everything you can, including use spell check, to help make that person's job easier.
I would agree. I would say it's not your primary responsibility.
Okay, sure.
It is your primary responsibility, though, to make it as easy as possible for your beta readers, because they're doing you a favor. Mm-hmm. You're not paying them. And I mean, if you are, I'd love to be your beta reader if you're paying beta readers. But most of us, you're not paying beta readers, right? Yes, they get the pleasure and joy of reading your wonderful book before anyone else does, but they're doing you a favor, is what it boils down to. So you don't want to give them a messy manuscript that you haven't read over again and you haven't spell checked. Girl, click that spell check button.
Absolutely.
Review.
Absolutely. What's your number 2 most common mistake?
Oh, this one is so painful, Anita. It's so painful. You do not need 2 spaces between sentences. When you click period or full stop, as our British friends say, or a question mark or an exclamation mark to end the sentence, you need only 1 space before you begin the next sentence. And I blame our schools for this. For the longest time, we were trained to do 2 spaces after a sentence, and that was because of the way typewriters typed. It was, I'm not a typography nerd, but a typography nerd could explain to you the difference between monospaced typing and proportionate typing. And with typewriters, it was monospaced, and in order for it to look right, you had to leave 2 spaces between sentences. Well, I don't know too many people at home typing on a manual typewriter anymore. I love a manual typewriter. I think it's cool.
Somebody's listening going, when did that change? People ask me that all the time. I'm like, what difference does it make when it changed? Just change 1 space.
Well, you know why? Because a lot of teachers learn that way, and they're still teaching their students that way. So teachers in my age group, your age group, our age group, they learn two spaces after a sentence. They haven't been back to school to learn any differently. And so that's what they're still doing. I love the Chicago Manual of Style. It is my go-to style guide. It says one space between sentences. But more importantly, with independent publishing, when you send your manuscript to the layout designer, they're not going to go through and take out spaces between sentences. They're going to do it the way that you sent it to them. And it's not going to look very good in the final printed book. It looks like you have big holes in the content of your book.
And I think you need to consider, as you should throughout the entire planning of your book, and that is the reader. Readers nowadays, even though writers and typers or whatever are used to, some people are used to two spaces, readers are not used to reading two spaces. And those old-fashioned newspapers we used to read, they don't even do two spaces anymore. Any text that you see online is single space after a period. So it's going to be frustrating to your readers to see that, as Candace said, that big old gap between the period and the next word. It's going to look like, did you miss this? Or is the typesetting wrong? Or are you just, living in the ice ages?
And it looks amateurish, honestly. So if you send it to your editor that way, your editor should catch it and let you know to fix it. But you can easily fix it yourself by doing a find and replace. You can just click find double space and replace with single space. Literally type in space, and then replace with space. And that will find most of them. It won't find all of them, but the best thing you can do is just start developing the habit of only doing one space after each sentence. And yes, it's going to be annoying to have to retrain your brain, but it's worth it in the long run to produce a better looking book.
Oh yeah. All right. Carol, you got any comments on that double spacing thing?
Yeah. Well, I knew about the double spacing thing, and I just go through and, do like Candace says thing. And it annoys me even when my clients who are not writing a book, but they're doing like maybe web copy or whatever, they will send me stuff with double spaces in it. I'm like, really? So I knew about that one.
I can notice it now.
Yeah, it's just how we were trained.
I know, it's so sad. But what you got for number 3, Candace?
Okay, so number 3 is a little less concrete, but it's just as important, especially for particular kinds of books like memoirs. It's particularly important in, but also in lots of how-to books. So a lot of authors will be really focused on completing their outline, and applause to you because you created an outline and you followed it, and that is great. But when you go back and look from chapter to chapter, or even from section to section, often it just drops off at the end of the chapter. Like no closure, no here's what's coming up next, no transition to kind of pique your interest to turn the page. And it can be very abrupt for the reader and feel like, well, is the author finished here, or did this get cut off, or what? And it also doesn't give the reader a reason to turn the page. So if you end your chapter with some sort of transition to the next chapter, or some either introduction or hint of what's to come, it doesn't have to be long, a few sentences, a paragraph maybe, but a transition to the next section or to the next chapter will give the reader a reason to turn the page. And we know that most nonfiction books, people only read something like the first 30% of them, unfortunately. And you want to give your readers as much reason to keep turning the page as possible. And you can do that with just giving them a hint of what's coming or some sort of transition into the next chapter or the next section.
Love that. Really good point. And that's true for fiction and nonfiction?
That's true it's super true for fiction. With fiction, you got no excuse. You really want to make sure that they're turning the page. They've got to be excited to find out what's going to happen on the next page. But it's just as true for nonfiction. So if you're writing your memoir, for example, it should really read like a novel almost in terms of its level of storytelling and interest. And one way to do that is to have the transition to the next chapter. But even with the how-to book, now not every book. So for example, when I wrote a cookbook, we didn't really have transitions from one page to the next because it's the next recipe. Okay, so that was not relevant to that. But for most books, even lots of how-to books, you can give a little bit of a hint as to what's to come, somehow connecting the information in one chapter and how it relates to the information in the next chapter. Literally, you can do this in a sentence or two, but it's just a good way to keep people turn the page.
You know,
Okay,
I like
Candace.
this idea, and I would love for us to explore it deeper because I think probably some of our listeners and viewers would love some examples of how that's done.
Me, I
Uh-oh,
would.
waving her hand.
Yes. Yes, because, and let me explain you why. I'm getting some free coaching to all of you people out there and to me. So thank you. I know that's what you're saying. All right. So my book has 10 strategies in it, and they don't necessarily go together. Like, for instance, start a podcast, then the next chapter may be, run for president. So how am I going to, I'm pretty sure that they're going to end up from 1 to 10 like I've written them, but what if they don't? So how do I just wait till I get the full working manuscript? Oh, I love saying that, working manuscript together, and then just go back in and add that little sentence at the end. So help me out, girlfriend. How do I do it?
You absolutely, actually, I think that's the smartest way to do it, Carol, is to, especially if you're not sure if that's the order you're ultimately going to keep all the chapters in, just write the chapters. And then when you go back for your revisions process, then you can look at, okay, then how do I connect launch your podcast to run for president? One sentence, you can add it there after you know what order the book's going to be in. Because if you do it up front, you're going to have to change it, and that's going to annoy you.
Thank you.
Love that. I love it too. And that rolls into the first of the 3 mistakes that I was going to talk about.
What you got, girl?
Oh my God. We don't even have enough time for me to get into everything. Tell people about mistakes, but it really speaks to, you know, in terms of the publishing aspect, the table of contents, which is what I was going to add to Carol's question, which is, especially in how-to books, you could also handle that in the table of contents. And especially with a book where there are 5 things you're teaching or 12 or whatever, obviously people can turn to the table of contents to see what's coming next if one doesn't rely on the other. They're not continuous and building upon each other. So your table of contents can be a great help, which brings me to the point that it has to be structured well. There is a typical, not 100% all the time, but there's a typical process that people go through, that book buyers go through, physical book buyers especially, but also online, when they're considering purchasing a book. And oftentimes we all know that they start from the cover, most often the front cover. They will flip to the back cover. They may look at the dust jacket flaps, but people almost always then go straight to the table of contents. So that is a hugely important part of your book production, and that table of contents needs to be done well. Some people tend to think that your table of contents has to have a line-by-line mention or description of not only the chapter, but every subsection in each chapter, and the book, and the page number, and all of that kind of stuff. This could just be my preference, but when I turn to a table of contents and it's more than a page and a half, and it has page numbers for every single page in your book because you want to highlight everything in your book in the table of contents, to me that is way too much. Your table of contents should be structured so that the possible potential book reader can get a feel for the type of content that's in there. You're not trying to give away the farm in the table of contents. And quite frankly, I, as a book reader, prospective book reader of your book, I want to know that your chapters are meaty enough that every other page is not a new chapter. So if in the table of contents, it's, you know, tells me page 11 is chapter 2, and then page 13 is chapter 3, I'm going to wonder why you have a distinction between chapter 1. It's only 2 pages. Give me a break. So to me, that's a section, not a chapter. That's a subsection, rather, not a chapter. So I think that, or I highly would suggest to authors to consider the way you structure your table of contents. Certainly make sure that there are page numbers corresponding to the chapters in your book. You might be surprised to know that there are books that exist that have a table of contents, and there are no corresponding page numbers to let you know what chapter, you know, that chapter 5 starts on. I saw one recently, and it floored me.
Yeah.
Because I know that this author paid money to have this book created, and I was very sad for this person. So structuring your table of contents so that it's just a simple roadmap for your readers to understand the type of content, your main points that you're covering in your book, obviously each chapter's title, and then of course making sure your chapters are juicy enough so that they are longer than a page and a half, and that every page in your book is not highlighted in your table of contents. You guys have any comments on that?
Oh, girl, so many comments. So many comments. So the exception that I have for that is technical books like the Dummies books. I have no problem with the fact that they break it down into small detail in their table of contents, because when I'm feeling like a dummy, that helps me. But most people are not writing books with that level. Even how-to books don't have that level of technical depth, right? So it's really not necessary. Oh, I will say also recipe books. I like to be able to find the recipes there.
Okay.
I think a reason why a lot of authors do that is they want to make their books really accessible, but they don't know how to do an index. So they want their book to be used as a reference book, so that if you wanted to drop into their how-to book and find, some very specific detail, you could find it, but they don't know how to create an index.
Okay, so yeah, the table of contents is not the place to prove that your book is a resource.
It's not the same thing. Yeah, they don't serve the same. Carol's laughing. It doesn't serve the same purpose.
That look on Anita's face was just. If I could rewind back to see that look, oh my God!
But
I just sit here like, yeah, and then Anita's like, whoa.
Yes, I think that's why they really want their book to serve as a reference book a lot of times, which it can, but you can pay someone to create an index for you if you can't do it yourself, which I would never try to create an index. I'll just pay someone to do it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Love it. All right, so that's that. That's our 2 cents on content. Okay, so my other mistake that I see commonly is that self-published authors don't add quite enough internal formatting and layout appeal in their books to make them interesting. I think we might find it, some listeners and viewers of the podcast might find it interesting to know that even adults like to see pictures in books. And what I mean by that are some kind of images. You've got to make the interior of your book interesting to the eye. Somehow. There's a lot of adult readers who are very visual. And for some people, opening a book where there's nothing but text and it's just straight block text with no breaks and that kind of thing, it's intimidating and it's boring to look at. So it almost suggests that they don't want to read it because it's just way too text heavy. And so by adding some formatting and interior layout design elements, and it doesn't have to be a lot, there is a point at which those even are overdone, it makes it more attractive and interesting for the adult book reader, okay? And so some examples of these design elements I'm talking about are what I have always just lovingly referred to as squigglies, but my favorite designer tells me they're flourishes. And these are the little squiggles you see at the start of chapters or at section breaks. It's just a nice, pretty little graphic element. It could be a line, a straight line, or it could be some squiggly thing, which is why I call it squigglies. When you're instructing people on how to do something, sometimes if you have a chart or a graph or a table, okay, to show, comparisons and things like that, that's always interesting. Obviously, photographs are nice if they're relevant. It could be of a person, a place, it could be a map, it could be a diagram that you've created, something you own. And I say that as a caveat. Of course, you need to be able to be sure that you have permission to use any images that you include in your book, or make sure that they're ones that you've taken yourself or ones that you own yourself. And that does not include stuff that you just grabbed off Google or whatever online resource, so don't go there. But you have to
unless it's in Creative Commons, that gives you the right to use it, but there's still license restrictions on there. So I just want to throw that in there. It's not like you can't use anything. You just have to be careful.
And it's creativecommons.com, and you do have to read those license restrictions. So make sure you understand what those are. But yeah, just make it interesting for people. I mean, oftentimes, again, going back to this process that people go through to read the book. So once they read your wonderfully organized and simplified table of contents, they're probably going to start turning the pages. They're going to be flipping through your book to kind of see what else is in there, what looks good. The exception to this, though, is novels. Oftentimes, you don't find novels with a whole bunch of pictures and stuff. But even with novels, there's a way to structure it. Of course, the font style you choose is really important. Your margins are really important. You want to have some white space on the page so it doesn't make people's eyes crazy. And then, of course, you want to have section breaks that make sense. And when people are reading books, they want to feel like there's an obvious place to stop so they can, go get some coffee and pick up the book at another time. Or they don't have to, God forbid, dog ear a page or mark in the book, I stopped right here. But, consider interior design and make sure you enlist the expertise of someone who is familiar with layout and design, and direct them to include some interesting graphic elements, and then challenge yourself to find some visual ways to depict the content that you're sharing in your self-help, how-to instructional book, and even, of course, in memoir. Any comments?
Yeah. Brings up two things for me. One, I had a client who was a novelist who wrote historical fiction, and she actually included old photographs in her novel as a way of she dealt with some true life characters and a way of bringing those to life. So that's a big exception. Most novelists don't do that, but it added something really rich and interesting to her book because you could see what the characters actually looked like. But we had a guest on one of our programs who shared how she used the graphs and charts in her book, her nonfiction book, to get print and digital media exposure, because she was offering them her proprietary graphs and charts as a way to make their own articles and stories about her more interesting. And so she was able to get more media exposure because she had added those things to her book.
Right. So there's a way to repurpose those items. And then maybe if it's a downloadable kind of thing, maybe you can, upsell that on your website or something like that. So just be creative. Don't overdo it, but make sure that you take into consideration the fact that your interior should not be text only. Okay. So I'm going to wrap mine up and then we're going to go to break. But the third, and I'm telling you, I have so many things, but I'm just narrowing it down to 3. My third kind of mistake that I see independent published authors make is sometimes, unfortunately, they skip the very basics of registration. So we all know that we want our self-published books to be considered a real book. And what does that include? That means that you obviously need an ISBN number, that International Standard Book Number, that identifies your book as the singular sole book that it is, right? Who the author is, the description of the book, the type of book, the style, all of that. That ISBN is attributed to your book and your book alone, and that helps it be available to booksellers and distributors and things like that. And so if you don't have that, your book is likely to not be found in many places, including libraries and things like that. Accompanying that ISBN number is the barcode, and that again helps resellers be able to scan that code and get that information correctly and know what the retail price is. So your ISBN number, the barcode that corresponds with that ISBN number, and keep in mind that depending on the different delivery, the different ways your book is available, you're going to probably require a different ISBN for each type of book. Whether it's a hardcover, that's a separate ISBN. If it becomes a softcover book, that's a separate ISBN. When you use your, turn it into an ebook, that's a separate ISBN. So keep those things in mind, but definitely make sure that your publishing services company acquires your individual ISBN number. Also with that, your Library of Congress control number, if you would like, libraries and other facilities to be able to find your book, Library of Congress control number. And all of that information plus more, and there's specific language that can be used on your copyright page, And that would have been number 4, but I was limited to 3, so I'm not going to talk about the copyright page. But there's some things that need to go on that copyright page, and some of those numbers and identifiers are really important to include there. And with the absence of these things, really makes your book look amateurish. Okay, so you want to make sure to include them. Any comment?
Yeah, Anita, I met a gentleman, I shared this with you, but now I'm going to share it with our audience. I met a gentleman who had a really awesome life story, you know, and so he wrote a memoir, and he worked with a company to publish the memoir, and he was really excited to share his book with me. He spent thousands of dollars with this company, thousands. Y'all hear me? And he handed me the book, and my heart broke. There was no ISBN number. There was no Library of Congress register. You know why? Because there was no copyright page. Flip the book over to the back. There was no barcode.
What?
So he had no way of knowing. He was under the impression that paying thousands of dollars, this publishing company would get it right. He didn't know what to look for, and he trusted that he would get what he paid for. He essentially got a shiny pamphlet. Because you can't present that to the world as a book if it's not done professionally as a book.
That's very sad.
Yeah.
Super sad. And it really is unfortunate that, you know, there are some companies that pitch themselves as author advocates and, you know, publishing services companies, and they don't practice detail and all of just the very basics that are needed. And so that's why we're here with the Write Books That Sell Now podcast. And other things to help you be a smart self-published author. We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our sponsors, and then we'll be back to find out some mistakes that Carol has that you want to avoid. Be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Write Your Life, helping professionals and entrepreneurs be an author, be an expert, be amazing. Write Your Life offers expert author coaching and book production services to help you produce a phenomenal self-published book you can use to leverage your business and your brand. Visit them at www.writeyourlife.net.
Get the Write Books That Sell Now free video training series. It's absolutely free, and you will learn a bunch of tips, tricks, and hacks from each of us to help you finally get your book done. In these free videos, we open the door to give you a taste of what you'll find in our high-value, information-packed online course. You'll get information on writing, publishing, and marketing your book, and it's all for free. To access the free video training series, just visit us at www.writebooksthatsellnow.com.
All righty. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Write Books That Sell Now podcast. We're here to give you real insight into the real world of becoming a successful self-published author. I'm Anita Henderson here with Candace Davis and Carol Dunlop, and we are talking on this episode about some mistakes that self-published authors need to absolutely avoid to make sure you get the thing right. Candace shared with us some of her 3 tips, and I'm telling you, everybody, it was hard for us to narrow it down. We're just covering 9, but there are like 900, I'm sure. I shared a few, and now we're going to turn it over to Carol to talk about some of her little pet peeves, mistakes that she wants to see you all avoid.
Awesome sauce, and I've learned a lot from you guys, as always, just from what you said. My numero uno mistake, and I think I listed as number 3, but this is really number 1, is not utilizing your web presence to actually sell your book, market your book. What do I mean by that? Number 1, you should have a website where your book is. I don't care if it's your company site or a website just for the book. You need to have a website where you can market the book. Second thing, because that's how you're going to drive people to get the book, besides Amazon. Amazon is not the only place that sells books. So I just want you to know you should be driving people to your website very first thing, and then they can go and purchase your book and then go to Amazon. So that's what we're going to do first. The second thing is not utilizing your URL, which is yourbook.com or yourcompany.com, in your email address. And guess what you are doing, and that is using Gmail, Yahoo, or Hotmail, or any of those other services that are not advertising and that you are not paying. They're not paying you to advertise them, right? So if you have a URL, your email address should be whatever your name is at yourwebsite.com. The number one reason for that is, you know where that little @ sign is? If you take that everything, the @ sign and everything that's in front of it, what have you got left? You've got your URL for your website. And if anybody wants to find out anything about you, they can just click on that and go to it. Now, if you're advertising Gmail or Hotmail or any of those other mails, where are they going to go? They're going to go to that site and find out about them. So I think they have enough money. You don't need to give them any more. So the other thing is, it's just really about having that presence on the big worldwide internet so that you can tell people, hey, go here, buy my book, get to know me. Because as we've always said, it's much bigger than the book anyway. So if people want to buy your book, you tell them where to go, to your website. And what else is on your website? All the other stuff, that other amazing things that you do that they didn't even know about. They just went there to buy a book. But they might walk away with like a $1,500 coaching package, or know that you've got something else in the works beside the book. Maybe it's just a workbook that comes with the book. Maybe they spend an extra $10 with you. So, just make sure that you're utilizing your number one thing that belongs to you, and that's your website. Okay, glad I got that off my chest.
But before you go on, Carol, I have a question.
Okay.
Recommendation for authors, and I get this question often. Should their website be my name or whatever, .com? Should it be mybusiness.com, or should it be mybooktitle.com?
That's one of the questions I can't answer for you. It depends on what you're doing. Like, take me, for instance. My husband and I are in business together in Creative Services International. So our website is csicorporation.com. So I'm thinking, the book that I have out now, do I need to put it on CarolJDunlopRocks.com, or do I need to put it on CSIcorporation.com? That's a legitimate question. Or do I just need to be CarolJDunlop.com? Well, I really don't want to. I came to the conclusion I do not want to separate myself from my husband, definitely. And yeah, that might be bad. And I really, really, really want to advertise the services of my business. So I'm going to drive the book sales to my website, and there I'm going to have a page. Now, will that change before the book comes out? Maybe. Will that change eventually? Maybe. But for right now, that's what I'm doing. So let's take, for instance, I know there was a client of Anita's that we were working with, and he actually created a book, and he was working for another company that was not his own. So he decided to make a website that was the book title, and rightly so, because what he was doing, he's not going to put his book on that company website and say, hey, this is my book, I'm an author. They don't care about that. They want to know about you. So definitely, want to name a website that's after your book name. So it kind of depends. Are you promoting you? Are you promoting your company? Or are you promoting the book? And it kind of, you may even want to kind of experiment with it. Because I'm telling you, there are so many website URLs out there. They have .com, .net, .rocks, .books, and they don't have .books for some reason. I don't know why they don't have that, but they don't have .books. So there are so many, those first level domain names out there. You can kind of experiment, and if you change up, all you need to do is point one to the next one. So when one clicks, they'll go to another one. So just kind of decide. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes. So there's some considerations, and it's broader than just whether one is right or wrong.
That is so true. That's so true. I mean, there's a lot to think about with this marketing thing, so you have to decide what it is you want to do. And like women, you are not held to that point. If you want to change your mind, honey, change your mind, because I do all the time.
All right, so what's your point number 2, Carol?
My point number 2 is the way the book looks, the front cover. So I can't say wild and crazy colors, because some people's brand is wild and crazy colors. But what I can say is make sure that your book design, the front cover, goes along with your brand. It is readable, it's legible. That if you have black text should not be on top of dark colors. If it's black text, it should be on top of lighter colors.
Say that again, Carol.
If it's black text, it should be on top of lighter colors. That's
because
really
you cannot read it otherwise.
You can't read it otherwise. So if you have a dark background, you should have white text, or maybe even bright yellow text. You should have some kind of light colored text. Because the whole thing is, how I judge a book is definitely by its cover. I go to the cover and I look at it, and if I don't like it from the cover, I don't read it. I don't even go any far. I don't even crack the book open. If the cover is ugly, you know, the one exception would be if you're a friend of mine and you say, hey, this is my book. I'm like, oh, okay. I'll read it. Okay. Yeah, that was good, you know. But if I don't know you, your cover is going to be the first thing that kind of brings me to you. So if you have images on there, the number one rule is do not have a fuzzy image or out of focus image on your cover unless you did that on purpose for emphasis and you've got some clear stuff on there, like the headline and all that is clear and crisp, but the background is faded out so people can tell, oh, that was intentionally done. But if you have words on there that are fuzzy, that looks like it's not the right resolution, because I can go up and say, oh, that cover is not the right, that's like a 72 DPI resolution instead of 300. What were they thinking? You know, you got to have the stuff right. You got to come correct. You have to present it like, this is my baby. You know, you wouldn't take your real baby out and they're covered in pizza sauce and you say, hey, hold my baby. And it's like, what? Get that thing away from me. You know, it has to look good. It has to look like you groomed it, all that good stuff. So that's my second point. Make sure your cover comes correct. It is in alignment with your brand. There's a lot of question about should an author be on the cover of their book or not. It's totally up to them. If you want to be on the cover, put your face on the cover, because I'm definitely thinking about putting my face on the cover. If you don't want to put your face on the cover, then don't put your face on the cover. You know, but it all has to look attractive. It has to look inviting. Because remember, most of the time, hopefully when you're in that bookstore or when you're on Amazon, they can only see that little thumbnail of you. It has to be able to stand out so that people can look at that thumbnail and click it so they can see the big book. If it's not interesting there, it's definitely not going to attract them, because sometimes that's all you have is that thumbnail to drive them to your book. Any thoughts on that, lady?
Agree.
Agreed. It's all about first impressions.
It is. All right. So my third point is my last thing I'm going to talk about is the book description. Now, I may look at your cover and I'm drawn to it and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Open the book, you know, like that stuff that you put in the front part of maybe the inside jacket or whatever, or the back cover that's describing what the book is about. If that stuff is dull, boring, not legible, misspelled words, I am not going to buy that thing. I'm sorry. I don't want to say it has to be marketing speak, because marketing speak could be thought of as salesy or hypey, but it has to be client-getting speak. So we're talking about writing a business-building book, right? So you need clients to build your business. Words that your clients will recognize, and they'll say, oh, they are so talking to me. They are talking to me. Just like a previous guest that we had on with the Biz Plan book, she showed that book in just such a totally different way. She was drawing in it. She had areas that looked like she kind of wrote stuff in it. And I was like, oh, my God, you are so talking to me, because I'm very visual. Other people might look at that and say, for me. But the description of what the book is about, you know, what it contains, how it is, if it's client getting to your specific clients, then they're going to buy it. But if you say some crazy stuff on there, like, this is a good book and you should buy it, and buy that thing. Ain't nobody got time for that. Okay? Stop.
You know, I tend to like some bulleted points on the back cover to help me as a reader know, you know, in this book you'll find these 5 things. That doesn't work all the time. It's a little bit too structured sometimes. But if this is a self-help book or some kind of a how-to, I want to know on the back cover, these are the 5 things that this will help you with, or these are the 5 things that you will learn. I'm just saying 5. It could be 3, but 20 is too many. Trust me, honey.
They're going to read after 10. They're just tired. They're not going to read that.
Yeah. I also like to see a nice headline, an attention-grabbing headline in the back cover text. You know, the greatest thing since sliced bread, blah, 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 whatever. So that sounds salesy. It sounds very marketing, but it also could be what Carol referred to as that client getting language. And then maybe a short paragraph. And then Carol, talk about, and Candace also, talk about the value of having some of those testimonial endorsements on the back. Who should write those, and who, you know, what types of book need them and don't?
Well, I'll speak to the value of having them, and Candace can speak to the value of who should write them and all that, because that is her area. But the very reason you want testimonials is because people want to know that somebody else besides them has read this thing. And they want to know that they've gotten value out of it. And they can spot one of those paid for testimonial, advermonials or whatever they tell them in a minute. If it sounds too hypey, they're like, just get some people, like your beta readers, or like people that you say, can you review this for me, in ways that we've talked about, especially in our book marketing summit. Read it, give their honest opinion about it, use those, and people will see, oh, somebody else read this. Oh, somebody else got something out of it. Oh, well, I think I'll take a chance on it, because that's all you're doing anyway. Get somebody to take a chance on it. And then, because if you don't even get them to take a chance on it, they're not going to know any of your yummy, goody, crunchy goodness at all.
Yeah. In the best of all possible worlds, and this is not always possible, but when it's possible, it's awesome. You will get an endorsement or a testimonial from someone who your ideal reader will recognize and already knows, likes, and trusts, right? So if you can find an influencer who's already reaching the community that you want to reach, and they know that person from their podcast or from their online presence or from having used their courses or read their books. Someone who's written a best-selling book in your genre would be awesome. Yeah. If you can get someone recognizable to that audience to write an endorsement or testimony for your book, that is called best possible world stuff right there.
Mm-hmm. Love it. That's awesome. So good. I mean, woo, you all, this is a hugely valuable episode.
Yeah.
We might have to come back on and do this one again with 9 different mistakes.
We have 9 more, I know.
Yeah, that self-published authors can make. We really want to encourage you all of you listeners, all of our viewers, to produce the best quality book you possibly can. And that means you have to be smart about it. That means, as we talked about, some people still hire publishing services companies. You have to be smart about your stuff too, so you can tell them what you want and understand what you should expect from those companies and those subcontractors you work with. And so we hope you've gotten a lot of information from this episode. Of course, you can always find more in our online course, Write Books That Sell Now, and you can get information about that on www.writebooks.sellnow.com. We have loved bringing you this. You see, we can just, rattle on and on about best practices and mistakes in the book publishing world. And we just want to help you get smart and grow successfully as a self-published author. So we are going to turn to a shout out. And I think I have shout out, don't I? I just happen to have a book. I just happen to have a book on me. I'm not even done reading this book, but it's called House Rules. And it is by Jodi Picoult. I've not read anything by her. And guess who recommended this book to me? My mama.
Aw.
My mama read this book. It's a New York Times #1 bestseller. And I'm just a few chapters in. And I am finding it quite engaging. Candace, have you read it? You've heard of her.
No, my daughter was on a Jodi Picoult binge for a couple of years. And so she gave me several of her books for birthdays and Christmases. And so I've enjoyed all of them. She's a very engaging, she's prolific, but she's very engaging. She spends a good tale.
Well, if you don't have House Rules in your collection, I'll share it with you when I'm done. But let me read everybody just a quick blurb on the back of her wonderful back cover text, which is awesome. It says, when your son can't look you in the eye, does that mean he's guilty? Good start. Good start, right? That's a great question. Oh, my gosh. So here's the description. Jacob Hunt is a teen with Asperger's syndrome. He's hopeless at reading social clues or expressing himself well to others, though he is brilliant in many ways. But he has a special focus on one subject, forensic analysis. The police scanner in his room clues him into crime scenes, and he's always showing up and telling the cops what to do, and he's usually right. But when Jacob's small hometown is rocked by a horrible murder, law enforcement comes to him. Jacob's behaviors are hallmark Asperger's, but they look a lot like guilt to the local police. Suddenly, the Hunt family, who only wants to fit in, are directly in the spotlight. For Jacob's mother, Emma, it's a brutal reminder of the intolerance and misunderstanding that always threaten her family. For his brother Theo, it's another indication why nothing is normal because of Jacob. And over this small family, the soul-searing question looms: did Jacob commit murder?
Dun, dun, dun.
I have no idea if he did it because I'm not even there yet. But it's so good. It's such a great book. The book is House Rules by Jodi Picoult, and I just love it. So look for it on Amazon or other booksellers, and it's just a great read.
Awesome.
That sounds totally awesome. Woohoo! We are done. Whew. My brain is kind of fried right now. So just listen, to Anita and Candace's 6 points and then give them my own. So we definitely hope that this episode has helped you, because we want you to have a marvelous, awesome sauce book. We don't want you to fit into any of these mistakes, and we're going to make sure that you don't. So if you have any questions, or you just feel like, hey, I want to hear some more, please go to our website, www.writebooks.sellnow.com. Visit the podcast, listen to all of it, and please let us know your thoughts. And we super duper love it if you would give us an awesome review on iTunes, because they help us so much. And if you have any questions or see a subject matter that you want us to cover, let us know that too. So for right now, we're signing off. See you again next time. Everybody take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Find out more about becoming an author and making the most of your book at writebooks.sellnow.com.